Is autism genetic or hereditary? Is it caused by a gene or certain genes? When I when my child was diagnosed with autism, one of the first things I asked was, what did I do to cause this to happen? Why is my child autistic? Do I carry an autism gene? It seems that before we even decide what to do, and sometimes even before we think about how to help or support our child, one of the first questions that comes to the mind of a mother is, why has this happened? How has it happened? And why has it happened to my child? This, I think, is a natural human response to want to find answers. And sometimes, sadly, it's also a search to find out who's responsible. Is it me, my partner, my family, my partner's family, something that went wrong in pregnancy? Was there negligence on the part of the doctors? Have I done something to cause this? There's also the tendency to think that if I know the cause, maybe I'll know the answer. Maybe there's a way out of this for me, for my child, for our family. So, scientists and other medical professionals have been doing many studies over the last few decades to determine the causes of autism. And the results of these studies are quite difficult for lay people to work through. But what has been established is that there is no one or single autism gene. There is no one specific gene that you transmit to your child that is the source of his autism. Researchers have known that genes contribute to autism since the 70s, when a team discovered that identical twins often share the condition. When one identical twin, has the autism, there's about an 80% chance that the other twin will have it as well. And the rate for fraternal twins is around 40%. When only one identical twin is autistic, the other might have a learning or social disability. And so, since then, scientists have been racking up potential genetic culprits in autism, a process of DNA decoding technologies that have grown in the last decade. The list of genes implicated in autism is growing. Researchers have tallied about 100 genes that they consider strongly linked to autism, and many of these genes are important for communication between the neurons in the brain. So, how do these genes contribute to autism? It is likely that changes or mutations in the DNA of the genes can lead to autism. The mutation can be inherited from parents, but mutations can also arise spontaneously in the egg or the sperm. And so these mutations are not found in the parents, they are actually only in the child. So, what we can see from this is that there are multiple gene variations or mutations that relate to autism, and much more research is needed and is currently happening in this area. If you have a family health history of autism, it makes you more likely to have a child with autism or to have autism yourself. So, if you have a child with autism, you are more likely to have another child with autism, especially if you have more than one child on the spectrum. Your other family members will also be more likely to have a child with autism. Autism is 4 times more common in males than in females, and people with certain genetic disorders such as Fragile X and Down syndrome are also more likely to have autism. Although there is a strong genetic component within autism, there are other important factors that increase the risk of having a child with autism. So, genetics is not entirely responsible for a child's risk of having autism. Environmental factors also contribute to the condition, but researchers disagree on the relative contribution made by genes and environment to the overall autism. Some of these factors are low birth weight, premature birth, infections of the mother during pregnancy, birth complications, gestational complications. I've even recently heard about autoimmune conditions as being a risk factor, but I wasn't able to find the study again. Also, drinking alcohol or smoking during pregnancy can be a risk. We also know now that autism is not caused by vaccines, by emotional remoteness of a mother, by toxic parenting, or other arguments that place blame on parents. It's also not caused by what food is eaten by children or what their parents eat. And with more successful research, it may be possible to do genetic testing in the future. But at this stage, doctors who are counseling couples who are planning for children will look mostly at the family history, such as whether one of the family members have autism or a developmental disability. They'll be looking at your children, your partner's children, parents, sisters, brothers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, anyone with a diagnosis of ASD, intellectual disability, even things like epilepsy and ADHD. Also, you might look at older family members who have not been diagnosed but show signs of autism. And all of this information will obviously help the practitioner to consider the likelihood of you having a child with autism and may be able to help you with counseling. If there is a family history of autism, your doctor may check your child more closely and earlier for the signs of autism and might refer your child to a specialist for evaluation. When a child is closely monitored and there is early detection and diagnosis, there is then the possibility of better treatment, early education, therapy, and this can lead to better outcomes for a child with autism. So, my daughter is autistic, and during pregnancy and at birth, I did experience some complications, such as severe morning sickness, which lasted a few months, premature rupture of membranes before I was in labor, so premature birth, preeclampsia, which is hypertension during pregnancy, an emergency cesarean, and there was low birth weight of 1.3 kilos. There's no history of autism in my family or in my husband's family. And so, if I think about it, I feel all these gestational and birth complications were probably linked to the autism. My first child was diagnosed with autism at the age of 5, by which time I had already had my second child. So when I had my second child, I did not know that the first one was autistic. My second child is neurotypical, so I've got one autistic child and one neurotypical child. But it's likely that if I had known of the statistic that parents who have a child with autism are more likely to have a second child with autism, I might in fact not have had a second child. The reality is that it's probably best for parents to be aware of the statistics and the history of disability in the family so that they can make informed decisions about whether or not to have children or to have a second child. At some point in the future, genetic assessment will become possible, but at present, what they do is a CMA test, which explores chromosomes in detail to detect genetic conditions that cause significant disability. So it's not an autism specific gene test, it's just to determine all kinds of disabilities, especially severe ones. So, for me personally, if I were to find out now that some of my genes or my husband's genes were the cause of my child's autism, it would not make any difference to me, to us as a family, to my choices. I wouldn't feel any guilt. I wouldn't assign any blame. I do feel that genetic and hereditary factors play a role in everyone's life. In many families, there are higher risks of cancer, cardiovascular diseases, and other illnesses, but we continue to make bonds, to make choices. And ultimately, I don't think genetic information or family history, if you learn it after you already have the child, will change anything that you do to build your relationship with your child, to help them, support them, and educate them, except that you might seek to intervene earlier, look for a diagnosis that could be done earlier, because this would place you in a position to better help your child. Um, and also, it's important for you to know genetic history because it will affect your decision about whether or not you want to have children. It will be interesting to see what scientists discover in the future about this matter. But for now, I think as a parent, it's just about enjoying your relationship and supporting and helping your child as best as you can.